Chidi stood before the grand doors of the luxurious hotel, heart pounding. It was the alumni reunion, and he knew his former classmates would flaunt their wealth. Determined not to appear out of place, he had a plan. He needed a beautiful, confident girlfriend by his side, someone who could play the part convincingly. His eyes settled on Anika at the cafe across the street. She was poised, elegant, and had an air of confidence that could easily pass for wealth. Chidi approached her, laying out his unusual proposition: he would pay her to pose as his girlfriend for one night. Anika's eyes widened, intrigue and amusement dancing within them. She agreed, curiosity getting the best of her. They sat across from each other, discussing the details. Chidi explained his reasons, his voice steady but his eyes betraying his embarrassment. Anika listened, occasionally raising an eyebrow at his desperation. She laid down her own terms: she would act the part, but on her own terms. They agreed on boundaries, outfits, and the fee. Anika insisted on being treated with respect, no matter the act. Chidi admired her boldness but felt a pang of guilt for dragging her into his web of lies. Still, he was in too deep to back out now. Anika stood before the mirror, admiring her transformation. She wore a sleek red dress that hugged her figure perfectly, paired with elegant heels. Chidi could barely recognize her when he picked her up, his jaw dropping at her radiance. He fumbled with his words, but Anika merely smirked, accustomed to the effect she had. "You ready to fool the world?" she teased. Chidi laughed nervously, knowing that the hardest part was just beginning. Together, they stepped into the luxurious venue, hand in hand, ready to play their parts. Heads turned as they entered. Chidi's classmates were stunned, murmurs rippling through the crowd. He stood taller, basking in the envious glances thrown his way. Anika played her part flawlessly, smiling gracefully and clinging to his arm like a woman in love. They mingled, exchanged pleasantries, and charmed everyone in their path. Anika was witty, intelligent, and captivating, making Chidi appear even more impressive. Yet, he couldn't ignore the flutter in his chest every time she laughed or touched his arm. The lines between reality and pretense were already beginning to blur. Anika was perfect. She laughed at his jokes, whispered sweet nothings, and looked at him with adoring eyes. Chidi marveled at her acting skills, but a part of him wished her affection was real. He caught himself staring at her, his heart racing. Anika noticed his lingering gaze but chose to ignore it, focusing on maintaining the facade. As the evening progressed, Chidi grew more comfortable, even forgetting they were acting at times. It felt too real, too natural. Yet, he knew it was all built on a lie. A slow song began, and Chidi nervously asked Anika to dance. She accepted gracefully, slipping her arms around his neck. They swayed together, moving in perfect sync, their faces close enough to feel each other's breath. Chidi's heart raced as Anika rested her head on his shoulder, her hair brushing against his cheek. He closed his eyes, savoring the moment. For a brief second, he allowed himself to believe it was real. But the weight of his lie loomed over him, heavy and unrelenting. They took a break from the dance floor, retreating to a quieter corner. Chidi's classmates approached, congratulating him on finding such a beautiful and successful girlfriend. Anika played along, smoothly weaving tales of her fictitious career and luxurious lifestyle. Chidi watched, amazed by her quick wit and charisma. But with every lie she told, guilt gnawed at him. She was helping him build a house of cards, one that could collapse at any moment. And when it did, he feared losing not just his reputation, but also the woman he was beginning to care for. Anika excused herself to powder her nose, leaving Chidi alone with his thoughts. As he watched her glide across the room, he felt a pang of longing. It was ridiculous, falling for someone he was paying to pretend. But her laughter, her smile, they felt genuine. His daydream was interrupted by an old classmate who teased him about settling down. Chidi laughed it off, but the idea lingered. He found himself picturing a future with Anika, wondering if she could ever feel the same. But how could she, when everything between them was built on a lie? As the evening wore on, Anika grew tired. Her smile faltered, and her laughter became strained. Chidi noticed, his concern genuine. "Are you okay?" he whispered. Anika gave a small nod, but her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. He suggested they leave early, much to her relief. She leaned on him as they made their exit, her guard down for the first time that night. Chidi felt her vulnerability and his protective instincts kicked in. In that moment, she was no longer an actress or an employee, she was just Anika. Silence filled the car as they drove back. Anika leaned her head against the window, her eyes closed. Chidi stole glances at her, admiring her delicate features. She looked peaceful, vulnerable even. He wanted to reach out, to comfort her. When they arrived, Anika whispered a soft "thank you" before stepping out. Chidi watched her walk away, his chest tightening. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to feel this way. But he did, and there was no denying it anymore. Chidi couldn't sleep that night. His mind replayed every moment, Anika's laughter, the way she looked at him, the way her head rested on his shoulder. He was falling for her, and it terrified him. How could he confess his feelings when their relationship was built on lies? Meanwhile, Anika lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. She had played the role perfectly, yet she couldn't shake off the warmth she felt in Chidi's arms. It was just an act, she reminded herself. But the way he looked at her. For a moment, she believed it was real. Chidi couldn't resist texting Anika the next day. He thanked her once again and asked if she wanted to grab coffee, just as friends. Anika hesitated but agreed. Curious about this man who seemed so genuine beneath his charade. They met at a quaint cafe, sharing stories and laughter. Chidi learned about Anika's dreams of becoming a fashion designer, while Anika discovered Chidi's passion for writing. They were no longer just pretending. They were two people getting to know each other, and it felt frighteningly real. Their friendly coffee dates became more frequent. Chidi found himself craving her company, her laughter, and the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about her dreams. Anika, too, felt drawn to him, his vulnerability and humor breaking through her guarded heart. But each time they laughed or shared a meaningful look, Chidi's guilt grew heavier. Anika was falling for a version of him that didn't exist. He was living a lie, and she deserved the truth. But how could he tell her without losing her? One evening, Chidi walked Anika home. As they stood outside her door, the air grew tense. Chidi looked into her eyes, his heart racing. He wanted to kiss her, to close the gap between them. But he held back, fear and guilt weighing him down. Anika's eyes softened, her lips parting as if to say something, but she quickly looked away. "Good night, Chidi," she whispered before slipping inside. Chidi stood there, his chest tight. He was in love with her, but he couldn't have her. Not like this. At another social event, Chidi brought Anika again. They played their roles perfectly, drawing envious glances. But Chidi's heart sank when he saw his wealthy rival, Daniel, flirting with Anika. She laughed at Daniel's jokes, her smile bright and genuine. Chidi's chest tightened with jealousy. He wanted to pull her away, to claim her as his own. But he couldn't. Not when everything between them was fake. Not when Daniel could offer her the life Chidi was only pretending to have. On the drive home, Chidi was silent, his jaw clenched. Anika noticed, her brows knitting with concern. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Chidi forced a smile, pretending everything was fine. But his heart was in turmoil. He wanted to confess his jealousy, to tell her how much he cared. But how could he, when he was living a lie? Anika deserved someone honest, someone who didn't have to hire a girlfriend to feel worthy. But he couldn't bear the thought of losing her. Chidi couldn't stand the idea of Anika falling for someone else. He suggested extending their arrangement, offering to pay her more. Anika hesitated, confused by his urgency. "Is this about Daniel?" she asked, her eyes searching his face. Chidi's heart raced, but he quickly denied it. "No, it's just. We make a good team," he stammered. Anika agreed, but her gaze lingered, suspicion brewing. She couldn't deny the thrill she felt at his jealousy, but she also wondered if his feelings were real. Daniel wasn't one to give up easily. He continued pursuing Anika, showering her with compliments and invitations. Anika played along, keeping up appearances, but Chidi's jealousy was palpable. He hated watching her laugh at Daniel's jokes, her hand resting on his arm. He knew it was all an act, just as it was with him. But the fear of losing her was real. He had to come clean. But every time he opened his mouth to confess, the words choked him. How could he tell her he was a fraud? Anika grew frustrated. Chidi's behavior was erratic. One moment he was sweet and caring, the next he was distant and cold. She wanted to confront him, to demand an explanation. But she couldn't risk breaking their contract or complicating their arrangement. She tried to ignore her growing feelings, convincing herself it was just part of the act. But each time Chidi looked at her with those intense, conflicted eyes, her heart betrayed her. She was falling for him, and it terrified her. One evening, after another eventful night of pretending, Chidi walked Anika home. They stood outside her door, the silence heavy. Anika looked up at him, her eyes soft and vulnerable. "Why do you look at me like that?" she whispered. Chidi's heart raced. He wanted to tell her everything, to bare his soul. But instead, he leaned in, his lips brushing hers in a gentle, hesitant kiss. Anika froze, her breath hitching, before melting into him. For that brief moment, everything felt real. The kiss changed everything. Anika couldn't get it out of her mind. She replayed it over and over, wondering if it meant something to him or if it was just part of the act. She hated how much power he held over her heart. Chidi, too, was consumed by the memory. He had crossed the line, blurring the boundaries of their agreement. But he didn't regret it. He wanted more of her laughter, more of her touch, more of her heart. But he knew he was playing a dangerous game. They avoided each other for days, both too afraid to confront what the kiss meant. When they finally met again, they acted as if nothing happened, laughing and joking like always. But the tension was undeniable, hanging heavy between them. Anika kept her distance, afraid of getting hurt. Chidi kept his emotions in check, terrified of losing her. They were trapped, pretending to be something they weren't, all the while wishing it was real. But the truth loomed over them, waiting to shatter the illusion. During another outing, Chidi watched Anika laugh, her eyes sparkling under the city lights. His heart ached, knowing she was only pretending. He couldn't stand the lie any longer. "Anika, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice trembling. Anika looked at him, curiosity and concern etched on her face. But before he could speak, Daniel interrupted, inviting them both to a party. Chidi's courage evaporated, his confession left unsaid. But the guilt grew heavier, threatening to crush him. At Daniel's party, Chidi was on edge. He watched Anika charm the crowd, her laughter echoing through the room. Daniel hovered near her, his interest evident. Chidi's jealousy flared, his fist clenching as he watched Daniel touch her arm. Unable to contain himself, Chidi confronted Anika, his words harsh and laced with insecurity. Anika's eyes widened, hurt flashing across her face. "Why do you care?" she demanded. Chidi stammered, unable to confess the truth. Anika stormed out, leaving him standing there, regret searing through him. Anika avoided Chidi after the party, her heart heavy. She was confused by his jealousy, by the way he looked at her, by the way his words hurt. She hated how much she cared, how much she wanted him to feel the same. Chidi tried reaching out, but Anika ignored his calls. He couldn't blame her. He had lashed out, projecting his fears onto her. But how could he explain his jealousy without revealing his feelings? He was trapped by his own lies, his heart breaking with every passing day. Determined to make amends, Chidi showed up at Anika's doorstep, flowers in hand and an apology on his lips. Anika hesitated but eventually let him in. They sat in awkward silence before Chidi finally spoke. "I was out of line. I was jealous. And I'm sorry." Anika's eyes softened. "Why were you jealous, Chidi?" she asked, her voice gentle but probing. Chidi's heart raced. He wanted to tell her everything, but fear held him back. He settled for a half-truth, admitting to insecurity without revealing the depth of his feelings. They resumed their arrangement, but the atmosphere was different. Anika was cautious, her guard up. Chidi tried to act normal, but his emotions were a tangled mess. He was falling deeper, but he couldn't bring himself to confess his feelings or his lies. They continued attending events, playing the role of the perfect couple. But every smile, every touch felt loaded with unspoken words. Anika's laughter no longer sounded genuine. And Chidi could feel the distance growing between them. His lies were slowly destroying everything. For Anika's birthday, Chidi surprised her with a gift, a beautiful bracelet with her initials engraved. Anika's eyes widened, tears glistening. "Chidi. It's perfect," she whispered, her voice breaking. She hugged him tightly, her heart racing. For a moment, Chidi allowed himself to believe she could feel the same way. But then he remembered the truth, the debt, the lies, the facade. The bracelet was expensive, bought with money he didn't have. He was digging himself deeper, hoping to buy her love with lies. Chidi's financial situation grew worse. He was drowning in debt, struggling to keep up with the lavish lifestyle he was pretending to live. Creditors were calling, and his bank account was nearly empty. But he couldn't let Anika find out. He took on more odd jobs, working late into the night. But the exhaustion was taking its toll. He became distant, his smile strained, his eyes hollow. Anika noticed his change in demeanor, but Chidi brushed off her concerns, lying once again to protect his secret. Anika grew suspicious. Chidi was always tired, his excuses becoming flimsy. She noticed his worn-out shoes, the way he avoided expensive places, the way his hands trembled when paying bills. Something wasn't right, and she was determined to find out the truth. She followed him one evening, shocked to see him walking at a construction site. Chidi looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped under the weight of his secrets. Anika's heart broke. He wasn't wealthy, he was struggling. And he had lied to her. Anika confronted Chidi the next day, her eyes blazing with anger and hurt. "Why did you lie to me?" she demanded. Chidi's face paled, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to find the words. He wanted to explain, but where could he even begin? He confessed everything, the fake relationship, the debts, the fear of rejection. His voice shook as he admitted his feelings for her, his fear of losing her if she knew the truth. Anika listened, her eyes filling with tears. She was hurt, betrayed. But underneath it all, she still cared. Anika walked away, her heart shattered. She felt foolish for falling for a lie, for letting herself care. Chidi called after her, his voice desperate, but she couldn't face him. How could she trust him again? Everything between them had been fake. Chidi watched her leave, his heart breaking. He had known this day would come, but it didn't hurt any less. He had lost her, lost the one person who made him feel truly alive. And it was all his fault. Days turned into weeks. Anika threw herself into her work, trying to forget Chidi. But his face haunted her dreams, his words echoing in her mind. She missed him, missed his laughter, his kindness, his gentle eyes. But she couldn't forgive his lies. Chidi sank into depression, his guilt consuming him. He wanted to make things right but didn't know how. He had lied to protect his pride, and in doing so, he had lost the one person who mattered most. Chidi couldn't live with himself knowing how much he had hurt Anika. He decided to come clean, not just to her, but to everyone. He confessed his financial struggles to his friends, admitting his insecurities and lies. It was humiliating, but freeing. He worked tirelessly, paying off his debts and rebuilding his life. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't forget Anika. He needed to see her, to apologize, to tell her the truth one last time, even if she never forgave him. Anika heard about Chidi's confession through mutual friends. She was shocked, her anger softening. He had lied, but he was trying to make amends. Her heart wavered, torn between love and betrayal. Could she forgive him? Did she even want to? She missed him, missed his smile, his jokes, his warmth. But trust was fragile, and hers was shattered. She needed time to heal, to figure out if love was worth the risk of pain. But her heart already knew the answer. Fate intervened when Chidi and Anika ran into each other at a local cafe. Their eyes met, and time seemed to freeze. Chidi's heart raced, his palms sweating. Anika looked away, her expression guarded, but Chidi saw the pain lingering in her eyes. He approached her hesitantly, his voice soft. "Anika, can we talk?" Anika hesitated before nodding, her heart pounding. They sat down, the silence heavy and uncomfortable. Neither knew where to begin, but both knew that this conversation was long overdue. Chidi poured his heart out, his voice raw with emotion. He explained his insecurities, his fear of rejection, his desperation to fit in. He admitted that he was wrong, that his lies had hurt her more than he could ever imagine. Tears welled up in Anika's eyes as she listened. She could see his remorse, his vulnerability. But the pain of betrayal still lingered. "You made me believe. You made me care," she whispered, her voice breaking. Chidi's heart shattered, his guilt overwhelming him. Anika walked away once again, leaving Chidi devastated. She needed space to process everything. Her heart was conflicted, she loved him, but she was scared to trust him again. The memories of their laughter, their stolen glances, their kiss, all of it felt tainted. Chidi sank into despair, realizing that no matter how much he apologized, he couldn't undo the pain he had caused. He had broken her heart, and now he was paying the price. But he refused to give up, not when his love for her was real. Days turned into weeks. Chidi focused on rebuilding his life, working harder than ever to pay off his debts. He let go of his insecurities, accepting himself for who he truly was. He no longer cared about impressing others, his only desire was to be worthy of Anika's forgiveness. Anika, too, was on a journey of healing. She reflected on their time together, the joy and the pain. She realized that despite the lies, Chidi had shown her genuine kindness and love. But forgiveness was complicated, and her heart was still fragile. Chidi mustered the courage to visit Anika at her workplace. He stood outside, his heart racing. He didn't expect her to forgive him, but he needed her to know that his feelings were real, that he loved her. Anika was shocked to see him, her guard immediately rising. But Chidi's sincerity broke through her walls. "I don't expect you to take me back. But I needed you to know that I love you, Anika. I always have. His voice trembled, his eyes pleading. Anika's heart raced at his words, her eyes wide with shock. You love me? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Chidi nodded, his expression vulnerable and raw. I do. I was a coward, but my feelings were never a lie. Tears filled Anika's eyes, her heart aching. She wanted to believe him, to trust him again. But fear held her back. I don't know if I can trust you, she admitted, her voice trembling. Chidi's face fell, his hope crumbling. But he understood. He had broken her trust, and it was up to him to earn it back. Chidi didn't give up. He began showing up at her workplace, bringing her lunch, writing her heartfelt letters, and proving his sincerity through actions, not just words. Anika was touched by his persistence but remained cautious, her heart still fragile. Slowly, her walls began to crumble. She missed him, missed his laughter, his kindness, his love. But she was terrified of getting hurt again. She watched him from a distance, her heart torn between love and fear. Could she trust him again? Anika's friends noticed her growing affection, teasing her about her secret admirer. She brushed off their comments, but her heart fluttered every time she saw Chidi waiting outside, his eyes filled with hope and longing. One evening, Chidi walked her home, their conversation light and easy. For a moment, it felt like old times. But the fear of heartbreak lingered, holding Anika back. She wanted to believe him, but the past still haunted her. Anika confronted her fears, realizing that she still loved Chidi. She was tired of running, tired of denying her feelings. But before she could take the leap, she needed to know one thing: would he lie to her again? She met him at the cafe. Her expression serious. If we try again, will you be honest? No more lies, no more facades. Chidi's eyes softened, his heart pounding. I promise, Anika. I'll be honest. Because I don't want to lose you again. Anika hesitated, her heart racing. She looked into his eyes, searching for any trace of deception. But all she saw was love and vulnerability. She took a deep breath, her walls crumbling. Okay. Let's try again, she whispered. Chidi's face lit up, his eyes shining with hope. He reached out, taking her hand in his. Anika's heart fluttered, her fears slowly melting away. She was taking a risk, but love was worth the leap. They took it slow, rebuilding their relationship brick by brick. Chidi was honest about his financial struggles, his insecurities, and his fears. Anika listened, her heart aching for his pain. She admired his courage, his willingness to be vulnerable. They laughed, cried, and grew closer than ever before. Anika's fears slowly faded, replaced by trust and love. Chidi, too, felt liberated, no longer burdened by lies. Their love was real, raw, and beautifully imperfect. They attended another social event, this time as their authentic selves. Chidi was nervous, worried about judgment. But Anika held his hand, her smile unwavering. I'm proud of you, she whispered. For being yourself. They faced the curious stares and whispers together, their love unbreakable. Chidi realized that he didn't need to pretend anymore. He was enough, just as he was. And with Anika by his side, he felt invincible. Chidi and Anika grew stronger with each passing day. They faced challenges, misunderstandings, and fears, but they overcame them together. Their love was built on honesty, trust, and vulnerability. It was messy, imperfect, but real. Chidi no longer feared judgment or rejection. He had found his worth, not in wealth or status, but in love and integrity. Anika, too, had learned to trust again, her heart finally at peace. They were each other's safe haven, their love a beautiful journey. One evening, Under the starlit sky, Chidi knelt before Anika, his heart racing. Anika, you taught me how to love, how to be honest, how to be myself. I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me? Tears filled Anika's eyes as she smiled, her heart bursting with joy. Yes. 1,000 times yes. They embraced, their love sealing their fate. They had found their happily ever after, not in perfection, but in each other's arms. They walked hand in hand, ready to face the world together. Their love had been tested, broken, and rebuilt. It was stronger than ever, grounded in truth and trust. They were no longer pretending. They were real, and they were in love. Chidi and Anika stood on the balcony of their modest apartment, gazing at the city lights. It wasn't the luxurious penthouse he once dreamed of, but it was home. It was theirs. Anika leaned her head on his shoulder, her fingers intertwined with his. Chidi kissed her forehead, his heart full. He had found something far more valuable than wealth. He had found love, acceptance, and his true self. They had walked through lies and pain, but they emerged stronger, braver, and deeply in love. This was just the beginning of their forever. The sun shone brightly as Chidi stood at the altar, his heart pounding with anticipation. He glanced at his friends and family, their faces filled with joy and pride. Then he saw her, Anika, breathtakingly beautiful in her ivory gown, her eyes glistening with love. As she walked down the aisle, Chidi felt his eyes water. He had never imagined this day, never believed he deserved this happiness. But Anika's smile reassured him. She chose him, just as he was, no pretenses, no lies. And he would spend the rest of his life cherishing her. Chidi's voice trembled as he spoke his vows. Anika, you walked into my life as an act, but you stayed as my truth. You showed me how to love, how to live, and how to be real. I promise to love you, honor you, and stand by you, through every joy and every storm. Anika's eyes sparkled with tears. She took his hands, her voice unwavering. Chidi, you taught me how to trust, how to forgive, and how to love fearlessly. I promise to be your partner, your confidant, and your best friend. I choose you, today and always. They exchanged rings, sealing their vows with a kiss. The guests erupted in applause, celebrating the union of two souls who had overcome lies, fears, and heartbreak. Chidi held Anika close, whispering, "Thank you for loving me. The real me." Anika smiled, her heart full. "It's the only you I've ever loved." Their eyes met, and they knew they were home. They had built their love on broken foundations, but it had grown stronger, unshakable. This was their love story, one of truth, trust, and a happily ever after. They danced under the stars, their laughter echoing into the night. They had found their happiness, not in wealth or status, but in each other. Their love was imperfect, messy, but beautifully real. And that was more than enough. Their story wasn't about pretending anymore. It was about finding the courage to be true, to be vulnerable, to love without fear. Chidi and Anika were no longer living a lie. They were living their truth. And their love story was just beginning.